Welcome, welcome, welcome. Folks, I have a very, very special treat for all of you today. We are going to be speaking with Mr. Larry Williams. If you've never heard of him before, he is literally a world champion trader, an author multiple times over, and also a pretty accomplished philanthropist. So I'm excited for this conversation. And if I'm being honest with all of you, it's a little bit of a starstruck moment for me, and we're going to be getting into this a bit later. But his book, I found it in college, and it's actually one of the things that led to my trading career. So this is a very, very special opportunity. Larry, Mr. Williams, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm here in the beautiful big sky state of Montana, enjoying, hopefully spring is going to come, or maybe even summer. It's been a really tough winter this year.
Yeah, it has. And we're looking at your backdrop right there, Montana. It seems absolutely beautiful. Home seems beautiful. It's just something about being out there, that fresh air, the animals. It's just a different, I guess, speed of life. And to me, it's something that's a little bit more human almost, if that makes sense.
Well, I grew up here, and I think it's very helpful in that it's so big that your vision of the world is unlimited.
Mm,
If you grow up in New York City, it's from block to this block and that block,
mm.
but here it's like I took a drive the other day about 300 miles to just see a friend of mine. That's the next closest town almost, and it just looking at the beautiful country and the snow and thinking, Indians used to live here, and how did they get along, and they did, and it really opens up your mind. I think it allows you to be really creative.
Honestly, I think that's a great transition. Do you think in a way that almost helps with your trading to understand like just the size and the importance? Because obviously every trader knows whether you're new or just a storied career, one of the key things is to keep your emotional and your mental state under control. So do you think that there's something in play there of just understanding like the size of where we are, not only in the country, but just in the time of everything, to not get too philosophical? But is that something you actively think about?
I think it depends on the person and how they grew up, what they grew up in, their own environment. I think you always feel more comfortable in your environment. If I grew up in New York City or downtown Chicago, that would probably feel more comfortable to me. So
Mm.
I find comfort in wide open spaces and being able to look out across the ocean. When I get cloistered in the big cities, I get a little antsy and I just, there's too many things for my mind to process. So I like simplicity.
Hey, I could definitely appreciate that. So obviously you grew up in Montana. How early on in life did you start trading? What was going on that you even got like the initial itch or the initial interest to become a trader?
I'll never forget it. 1962.
Mhm.
John Kennedy rolled back steel prices and the stock market crashed.
Oh,
Now later I said, well, maybe it wasn't really what Kennedy did. It was cycles and it was the advanced decline line and everything else. But there was a huge stock market crash. And I asked a friend of mine, well, what a guy, I didn't grow up with a family that ever owned stocks. So I said, what does that mean? The market crash. He said, well, see that stock was up 1 point today. I said, yeah. He said, well, if you would have bought that yesterday and got out today, you would have made $100. I got $100. In 1962, you could buy a car. I did for $100.
wow.
$100 was a huge amount of money. This is for me. I don't know what it is, but I can guess if they go up or down. And it looked like easy work. And of course, it's the hardest work I ever had. But that was what really attracted me to it. When I got my mind focused on stocks, trying to figure out if they're going to go up or down tomorrow.
So like so many of us, just the concept of solving some sort of puzzle, being on the right side of it and making money. So if that was somewhat of your humble beginnings, like so many of us have, what then eventually took place that I was reading that you turned apparently $10,000 in a trading competition to over 1.1 million and 11,000% gain. So, obviously you had to learn many different tools, whether it was psychological or technical analysis or fundamental breakdowns. Like, how did you go from your start to such an extraordinary performance in a world trading championship?
Well, it's a really long story. I won't get into all of it, but like most everybody, initially I lost money trading,
Mm.
and it was a real tough time. It's forced me to do research to try to get educated. I read Joe Granville's book, and I eventually became a friend of Joe's, which is really a great thing in my life. And to get to know him, and I still didn't see in the book how I could make money. It was just that became the great problem in my life. Um, Early on in my life, excuse me, I was told if you want to really have a happy life, fall in love with a great problem. And the market was a great problem for me, still is. I don't have all the answers to it, but I just started working on a theory of how I can tell if these prices are going to go up or down. And then I became, somewhat successful at it. People knew about me and, all that kind of stuff. But in 1987, we had the World Cup Trading Championship, and but also the stock market crash. And I just decided I was going to try to win the championship that year. I was a very short-term trader then. I'm not as much now. And I was really foolish. I used a wild form of money management. Basically, bet almost everything on every trade. And so if you're right, you make a lot of money. If you're wrong, you're going to lose it all. The actual $10,000, a lot of people don't know, Matt, ran up to $2.1 million.
Oh.
And then it declined to $750,000 in the crash. And we're pretty mechanical trading. And I was in Kenya, Africa on a safari. And my good friend Ralph Vince, who was working for me at the time, was in charge of the trades. And it was a mess. And I came back from Kenya and we were at $750,000 and then traded that back to $1.1 million. I'm done. It's okay. And that was it. But I was hot. I was totally focused. Probably wasn't a real nice person that year because I was just focused totally on the markets. And I used a very, very aggressive form of money management. So it wasn't just being an okay trader. It was largely using a very wild form of money management that did it.
It almost sounds a little bit to me right now. I'm continually reading articles of how zero DTE options are like exploding in popularity, of just like huge risk parameters, and people are just kind of going for it. It's more of like a lotto mindset. And I'm not saying that's exactly what you did, but yeah, obviously risk management's important. Now, in that particular, I guess, jaunt of trading, or maybe before or after, is there a particular, like on one side, a super successful individual winner that like stands out in your mind? And maybe we could talk a little bit about like the other side of it. Is there a particular loser that like still keeps you up at night today?
Well, I don't remember any of the winners, frankly. I do remember the one loser.
So true.
We were long, short. We were short bonds, and then they gapped up, way up when the market bottomed in '87, and we had to get out of those bonds, and that was a substantial loss. I have no idea the winning trades. But I certainly remember the losing trade. But they don't cause me not to sleep at night, though. I mean, it's a past. I have a past, but it doesn't have me. You have to move on to your next trade. If you can't do that, you're not a trader.
Man, I love that. You have a past, but it doesn't have you. That's a great, almost psychological tip in the world of trading. Of like, another one that's kind of like that is like, you're as good as your last trade, but like you're always just trying to move on. Like that's all it is. It doesn't matter because this is such a forward-looking game. And is that how you always were, or did it take time to almost develop that mindset when you were trading?
Well, I think I've always been that way. I just, I always figure that I'm going to get out of whatever situation I'm in, and that good will prevail. So I don't really worry about the future. My father worried about everything, and I think I learned from him not to worry, and probably to an extreme, probably excessively not worrying about things. It's probably times has been a bad habit in my life. But in terms of trading, there's another trade out there. I know this though, that people say the most important thing for a trader is money, but it isn't. It's his confidence. I've seen very wealthy people with a lot of money that trade and they've lost their confidence and they never come back ever. And so to me, you have to maintain some internal confidence. Where does that come from? Does it come from your success? Does it come from you? Does it come from whatever? But if you don't have that confidence in yourself, it's going to be really hard to be a trader, because you've got to pull the plug or pull the trigger either way and say, I'm risking a lot of money here in this trade. And that takes confidence to do that.
Yeah, it definitely does. And obviously, whatever methodology, both psychological and mechanical in terms of the actual execution, but also mindset, whatever you're doing, it's not just going on in your world, because my research is correct, not only do you have some family members, but just students who also won various trading championships. So your methodology, it's clearly successful to a pretty high degree because people have taken it, maybe I would assume fit it to themselves of like whatever does work and doesn't work, because we're not all the same. But yeah, massive success for family members and students under you. So are they following you to the T, or do they kind of learn from you in more of a general sense and then fit it to their own personalities?
Well, that's a reason interesting point. I think that actually is the most significant thing in my career, is that I've been able to teach people what I do, that this is something that I can transfer from my mind to somebody else's mind. And clearly the other minds I've transferred it to are probably a lot smarter than me. So they'll see stuff in mine that I can't see, because, I think my indicators are like my kids, they're the best on the block. But with an outside look, people can say, yeah, Williams, I see Williams got this, and I can add this or delete this or whatever. So it's an organic product that's based on Larry Williams stuff. But clearly these people have taken that and made it work for themselves. And I think that's why we've seen so many of these championships continue to be won almost every single year by people who I've had some contact with, who've taken my classes. They've just been able to take it a step beyond me, because I'm blocked into my view, and they're able to expand that.
Man, I love that. I would love to share a story with you, because I'm early on in my trading career and I have many, many things to learn, but it kind of somewhat got kickstarted when I was in college. I was kind of walking around the library, as many college students do, just looking to waste time. And I actually came across your book, The Long-Term Secrets of Short-Term Trading. And I have to admit, I didn't really know anything about trading. I knew about stocks. I definitely didn't know about futures, and I'm bringing that up for everyone in the audience because in the book, it's futures heavy in terms of your examples. But what I liked about it was, to my understanding of trading, it was very much a Warren Buffett style of people would, by any metric, find a company that they believe is good, they get into it, and they hold it for a while. And then in your book, you were talking about just more of a mechanical system of, hey, like you were just breaking down the odds of it, and me studying computer science and statistics, I was like, oh, you could trade this way? And then I just, errant Google search, I looked at like leverage rates of futures, and I was like, oh, not only could you trade this way, you can make serious money this way. And then, of course, I went completely degenerate with it, and I started trading binary options. And similar to you, there was no risk control there. I was going all in, all out, and I ended up paying off a semester of college that way. But it was wild, but it really got started. For me, I was just like, okay, if I can have rules XYZ to get in, and then rules like 1, 2, 3 to get out, I can test it. It gave me something that I can know the odds of it. And I started thinking of it a little bit more like poker than random chance or a long-term investment. And that was the mindset that I was like, oh, okay, like this is something I'm interested in. And I've been kind of running with that ever since. But folks, if you haven't already, I believe you have over 10 books, but this is the one for me, The Long-Term Secrets of Short-Term Trading, that I found it randomly in college. And I probably read it now once a year, once every 2 years, because there's little things that you pick up. And I love this concept of trading when you can teach someone else, and then exactly what you said, they run with it in their own mindset. And like I've had like kind of those aha conversations with other people when I explain something, and like, well, what about this and this? I'm like, I've literally never thought of that before. What, like, it's just an exciting way, and it feels like you're just solving this like massive puzzle. And I don't know if that's how it is for you, but for me, that's like what keeps me going, because it's a giant puzzle to be solved, and the people who solve it end up getting money. Like, what an awesome prize at the end of the day.
I have a similar experience. One of the best things I've ever used in trading was written in one of my books. And somebody came up to me and said, wow, that is really awesome. I made so much money. I said, with what? He said, well, that thing in, chapter 32, page 4. I said, really? And I said, I forgot all about that. So I went back and looked at it. It was very successful. So there is stuff in books that's good. Of course, you can't trust everything in books. That's why you test. And things change. When I started trading, I was a big pork belly trader. We don't have pork bellies anymore. We don't have plywood. We don't have lumber. We don't have our eggs. We don't have anymore, or potatoes. So things change a little bit. But what makes a good speculator? I mean, speculate comes from the word specular, glasses, to observe. To speculate means to look and observe. And that's what I think you're doing. What I'm attempting to do is observing a set of data in the marketplace and seeing, well, usually when this happens, then that happens. And maybe I can make some profit once I have that knowledge. So it's a lot of knowledge. but it's not a perfect business because there's so much random activity. There's been 2 or 3 news stories today. Home Depot didn't make any money. That was bad. Somebody else made money. It was a market. Just so much randomness in the market that there's no perfection in this business. So if you're looking for perfection, this is not for you. But if you can handle the wildness of this, when I was young, I used to ride in rodeos. I rode bareback. And this is kind of like riding bareback. You get in the gates and you get back on your horse and they open up the gate and you come flying out. You just try to hold on for 8 seconds. It's kind of like can I hold on to the S&Ps for 8 seconds? Well, actually for longer than that for me, but how can I hold on to this? You got a winning ride. How can I hold on to it?
I love that. I didn't know that in my research view that you were do you have any crazy stories from that? I think that's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard from a trader, that is you were meant for trading. You were gambling there with your own physical health. Of course you're going to enjoy somewhat of that risk on gambling mindset of the markets if you're doing that literally with your physical health.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the really good traders I've known have a strong background in athletics or music, interestingly enough. And the ones in athletics, I guess we were always exposing ourselves to risk. And in college football, Charlie DeFrancesco, the largest bond trader in the history of the world, was a really good football player, Colorado. And so you get used to pain, I think, in that. I mean, I got hurt in football, obviously. So you realize that it's a good background because you still have to come back and you got to be there for the next play.
Man, that very fair point. Kind of going off that a little bit of clearly there's a competitive and somewhat of an obsession. I think a lot of the great traders that I've had the fortunate opportunity to speak with, they're truly obsessed with it. Day in and day out, no one's forcing them to do it. Something in their brain is wired that way where they just love it. So there is that psychology aspect to it. And let's also maybe call it a curiosity. But is there something concrete that when traders come up to you, is there things that you commonly find traders doing wrong and you're just hang on, this might be an overarching backdrop of how you should view the markets? Is there common advice that you would give to a retail trader who maybe they're just getting started, or maybe more so, maybe unfortunately they're losing and you're hang on, I think this is maybe a good way, a first couple steps to take to maybe improve things?
Yeah. What I see most people doing wrong is they'll show me in the old days their charts, or now the computers, and they're 20 indicators on there. They'll have my percent R, John Bollinger's percent B, stochastics, MACD. They're all the same thing, but they're just redundant. So I think people are over indicated. I think each indicator in your chart should be for a specific purpose. One might be to show professional accumulation in the market, one to show overbought, oversold, one to show seasons or cycles or whatever, but each indicator is for a specific purpose. And people just read books and toss all these indicators in the charts. And they have no idea why the indicator is there, and they read about it, but they're almost always redundant indicators. They're not the same. And I think you have to be very careful. This is a really very addictive business. You mentioned how we get consumed with it, and that's part of the addiction. And it can be dangerous. I've seen people lose fortunes in this business. I've seen friends of mine, who committed suicide because of trading. Ooh. So people don't realize how incredibly difficult this can create and make one's life. So you have to really realize this is very dangerous, and money management is critical. And you can start really small. You don't have to start big. You can paper trade for a long time before you think you figure it out. But usually the underlying cause of I think, failure is people just want to trade. They're just oh, this is so much fun. And it is, until you don't have any money left.
That's some very, very solid advice. Going off of that note, where you're basically saying understand what tools to use and to use them right. You don't need to bring 4 different hammers to the one job. You need your one hammer for the appropriate job. Before we get into the current state of the market, I would like to talk about the current state of tools. And right now, I hear AI all of the time. AI. Do you think that's something that's going to end up really, do you think it's a flash in the pan type of a situation? Do you see it maybe in the long term being around in the world of trading, especially through the lens of retail? Or what are your knee-jerk reactions on AI and the integration with actively trading the markets?
This ain't AI's first rodeo. I financed a lot of artificial intelligence work 35 years ago, something like that.
Mhm.
And we came up with, and then we did neural networks. I put a lot of money into that with college professors that have written the books on neural networks, case-based, student-based, the whole thing, right? Lost money on all of it. Every
Oh.
trade we did, it didn't make money. And I
Mhm.
think there's a real reason why that there's going to be some help from artificial intelligence, obviously, but it's not the panacea, be all end all, because all the mathematicians that I've worked with recognize that math is perfect. And they're trying to take their perfect business and make my imperfect world perfect. And it isn't, because of randomness. This is not a perfect world. And they get frustrated because they can't make my business, the market, perfect. So math is too rigid to be really, really effective, I think, on a very short-term basis, longer-term basis, whatever. I don't think I'm not afraid of AI. One of the really incredible experiences in my life was I was primarily a systematic trader. And I was having dinner with my good friend Tom DeMark, a radio talk show guy, Glenn Beck, and Steve Cohen at Steve's house.
Oh.
And I started as an art major. That's my background, is art. I don't have any background in economics or math or business, and none of that. And I wasn't very good at art, so then I ended up with my degree in journalism. Well, that explains the books I wrote. So I look on the wall next to where we're eating, and I see, whoa, that Van Gogh was in my art books. Steve owns the Van Gogh or whatever the painting was, maybe Rembrandt or Van Gogh, I forget which. I go, he's not a systematic trader.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not either anymore. No, I'm changing my whole thought, because clearly here's a guy who's made billions of dollars trading without AI, systematics, whatever. I said, I think, and if you actually look at the results of the commodity funds that are mechanical strategies, they make money, but the ones that are more personalized in the trading, they make more money. So I think that there is skill in this business, and you can develop your skill. Mechanical systems can make money, but to maximize it, you just become a good trader.
So would you classify your current style of trading as almost like a hybrid? Like you'll use systems to maybe, I don't know, indicate if something's overbought, oversold, and then you'll almost use that as a backdrop on top of whatever your thesis of the current situation is?
Well, my strategy is really very simple. First, I'm not a technical trader. I'm what I call a conditional trader. I look for conditions that are usually at market highs or lows. That could be the trade report, cycles, seasonals, professional accumulation, a couple of indicators I developed. It doesn't mean the market's going to rally now, but usually when these indicators are there, we're going to get a rally or the opposite, a decline. That's a condition that sets up the market for a move. And it's not an original concept of mine. My mentor Bill Meehan taught me the basics of it way back in the 1970s. He said, you got to have conditions to cause markets to move. And what I believe so firmly is charts don't move the markets. Conditions move the markets, and technicians think charts move the market. Charts just show what the market's done. It shows the current emotions of the marketplace. So once the conditions are there, well, we should rally, or let's say we're looking for buy signal. Then I want to be able to confirm that with maybe on balance volume or what other technical tools you have. And finally, then we have trend entry. So it goes condition, confirmation, trend entry. On top of that, you put money management and exits and entries. And that's really the general outline of my theory of trading.
I like it because it's essentially the KISS methodology. Like, keep it simple, stupid. You learn what you're specifically good at. You're trying to not overcomplicate it. And I feel like, if anything, at least in my experience, the hardest part is just sticking to exactly what you told yourself you're going to stick to. With that in mind, though, could you give the audience a little bit of an idea of, Like, are you in this for a couple minutes, a couple days, a couple hours, a couple weeks, a couple months? Like, what's the duration? Because it sounds like throughout your career, you tried different time frames. And what are you doing right now, which I would assume is ideally the most successful time frame for you personally?
Well, I think the time frame changed. I'm 81. I'll be 81 in October. I'm an old man. Like, I don't need another trade. I've had, I don't know, millions and millions of trades. So I don't need another trade. I want a really successful trade. So my time frame is longer. The last day trade I had was because I was stopped out the same day I got in to a long-term position.
Mhm.
So my time frame is anywhere from 12 days to maybe 30, 40, 50 days. I've been in SP position, what I managed for a long time
Mhm.
on the long side. So partially depends on the market you're in and your belief of the market, but my time frame is not short term. And here's why. The basis of all profits is trend. If you don't have trend, you're not going to make any money. Then it could be real estate, stocks, it doesn't matter what it is. So ask yourself, what's the function of trend? And the answer is time.
Mhm.
The more time in a trade, the more trend you can get. So time is my friend, it's my ally. And I try to use time so I can catch a larger trend move.
I love that. I think that's very, very useful because I think right now, for whatever reason, there is an emphasis on like day trading, super short term. And
Yeah.
to make money doing that, that means you have to play with some serious size. And also, another thing that you were talking about is it's almost, and this is what I say a lot to the audience, is the shorter your time frame, the more randomness involved. You could be right on a bullish thesis, but it's nothing for like a 1 day like pullback. Like that's nothing at all. And then you might feel like your overall thesis is wrong. So it feels like the shorter the time frame, the more randomness involved. Would you agree with that statement?
Oh, absolutely. A lot more randomness on a very short-term time frame, and you can't catch any trend move. You're out by the end of the day. So you got 3 hours for a trend. So the only way you can make a lot of money as a day trader is to have a big position.
Mm.
And if you have a big position, you're going to have big losses. So I would rather have a small position and catch a large trend move. The mathematics of that are really good. Whereas the day traders, the math is just, it's all backwards. To make a lot of money, you have to have a big position. And you're going to have big loss, and you're probably going to let it run larger than you should because you are a day trader and you're emotional. So look at the math of it. It tells you what you should do.
Now, this mindset, just because you have yourself spoken with many other very, very successful traders, like even you were referring to Tom DeMark, you were referring to Steve Cohen. Do you think that what you were just describing is a commonly held belief?
Um, the best answer to that is actual research. My son's a psychiatrist trained at Johns Hopkins, and here prior to his work, everybody had done research on losing traders. And Jason interviewed just highly successful traders, traders that have made hundreds of millions of dollars or more. And he found 5 things in the personality of those people. He wrote about it in a book called Mental Edge of Trading, I think, Dr. Jason Williams. Um, One was they're all really good with detail. That's my weakness. My detail sucks. I work on it, but it's not my basic Buddha nature for sure. Um, this is really, really interesting. They all had a relatively low self-image of themselves.
Ah.
And on reflection, I know that's really significant because I've seen traders, especially in the old days in Chicago, yell and scream, buy Chicago, New York. I made 100 million here, 50. They all blew up. These really successful traders are pretty low-key people. They're not braggarts. They're not yelling and screaming and shouting. They're very quiet. Paul Tudor Jones, pretty quiet guy. I mean, be adamant about things, but they're not braggadocio. They're pretty well self-contained. And some of them, I'll say, what do you think of the market? Well, I don't know what it's going to do. And these guys are trading billions of dollars, right? So that was a relatively low self-image. All the other thing is that their emotions don't fluctuate wildly. Some people are way too emotional to be doing this. And these people, you could walk in and say, you're ugly and whatever, and they say, okay. Their emotions don't fluctuate wildly. And
Interesting.
so I think those are the traits that all traders should try to attempt to improve their personality uh, or hone in closer to that if you possibly can. A lot of humility. Um, don't be too aggressive. Um, be really good with details, and don't let your emotions get the best of you.
I find that self image one to be so interesting because whether it's books or shows or movies, the common stereotype of a trader is like an abundance of confidence. Like this suave guy who walks in with his suit, knows what to say, overly aggressive, overly confident. And it sounds like at least data behind that, it's almost as if the opposite. Someone who is very in the forefront of their mind, aware that it could seemingly blow up in their face in a second. I like how that's almost a counter narrative there. Very, very interesting.
And why that works is because then they don't bet big.
Mm.
If you have like, I don't know what's going to happen here. You're not an egotistical person. You won't bet big, but an egotistical person, I'll show you, and they'll bet everything on it, right? And that's how you get a lot of trouble in this business. So that it's interesting. When I was in New York recently, I was with a guy who was worth probably $3-4 billion. And we were talking about the markets, and it's the same thing. I said, what do you think of the market? Well, it's kind of biblical here. We had 7 good years and 7 bad years. And I'm thinking about this. That's not what you'd expect from somebody like that to say.
Mm-hmm.
Years and years and years ago, I briefly roomed with Ray Dalio, Bridgewater. And Ray, even back then, was that way. Like, he wasn't a braggadocio type of guy, screaming and yelling and stuff. The screamers and the yellers, the movie image of traders, guys are sure to blow up.
I'm just almost like a little shocked to like, it feels like you're pulling back the curtain and be like, hang on, the way it's being depicted, it's very different than the people who are truly successful. You did mention Paul Tudor Jones, and recently he's been kind of doing a media tour talking about his opinions, and he's been talking about the Fed and the market, and he's actually been pretty bullish. So just to, I guess, talk about things going on right now, what are you looking at in the market? Are you bullish? Are you bearish? Are you more of we're kind of teetering a little this way, a little bit that way? Would love to get your thoughts and insights.
I'm outlandishly bullish, and I have been since last year.
Bullish.
Right at the low. Oh, absolutely. We're
Okay.
we're in a bull market, and in a bull market, the strategy is to buy the breaks and sell the big rallies.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have a big rally here, I would sell some of my position and look to be a buyer on the next break. But the Cassandras, the purveyors of pessimism, have been wrong since last October, and they're going to continue being wrong. I think that we're probably going to have some weakness into June, but from June on, we're in a bull market, and you just have to keep telling yourself that there's no reason to be bearish. If you look at one of the charts right now, we'll look at the inflation chart. Inflation has been the fear of the marketplace. Well,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of inflation indicators. The one that we're showing is from the New York Fed, and this is a little different than the typical CPI index. And this has been coming down for some time. Clearly, see, it's topped. Inflation is behind us. So that means, as I understand the world, we'll see a lessening of interest rates, either very small reductions or no increases in rates. And I think that's going to be one of the bullish increments, simply because the big bugaboo of the market, inflation, is pretty much behind us. The cycle of inflation, about a 6-year cycle, and it topped out about a year ago, and we'll continue to see a lessening of inflation on into the next year and a half, 2 years. So that's one thing that I think is really bullish. Another one is that people have money to buy stuff. So if we look at the next chart of personal consumption, we see that people do have money, and that's in an upline. And when we're seeing that type of an uptrend, look, when we've seen recessions, we haven't seen recessions with this combination. So I think there's a lot of reason to be bullish here. And then on top of that, I really believe in cycles, and the most dominant cycles right now, I can't find a bearish one. No, it's short-term ones, but anything at long-term, no, they're all really bullish here. So I've been bullish since last October. The week of the low, actually, I think it was the day of the low, Tom DeMark and Peter Leides and I had dinner in Phoenix. And after dinner, we all said, okay, which way? I said up, Peter said down, and Tom was kind of mixed to bullish. And if you look back from that point forward, we've been in a bull market. So, has the trend been up? Yeah. You going to argue with the trend? I'm not.
I love your contrarian viewpoints here because if you turn on media, and this might have just to do with the fact that it's media and they know obviously
It's
more of the
media.
clickbait, like they want doomsday, they want the negative sentiment for you to like really click on the article. But all we hear is negativity right now, and it is various tail risks, whether it's inflation and the Fed, whether it's the debt limit, what's going on there, or even the regional banking sector. And does that stuff come into your mind, or are you saying, yeah, like I get it, and you're more in the second half of the year looking to, I guess, get into quality stocks that apparently, or even just the overall market that you're a fan of? Because it sounds like you're more of very regimented mathematically of like, this is the cycle, I'm looking for the cycle to bottom out, and then you're looking to, as you said, re-enter on the breakouts. Do you not really care about the debt limit, inflation, and I guess regional banking?
I mean, this debt limit thing is such a speculative argument. Come on. You think we're really going to go into and not honor our debt in America? How
Not at
many
all.
times has this been in front of Congress and presidents before? Lots of time. Did it always get
Hmm.
resolved? Yes, every single time. It will get resolved this time. This is like a stupid argument. This is a scapegoat argument. No, this isn't gonna. It's not an issue. But you're right. I mean, as I said, I have my degree in journalism, and what I learned is if it bleeds, it leads. We never wrote articles about how many houses didn't burn down today. But if one house out of a million burned down, oh, fire, fire, fire. If you want to get on NBC television or CBS or whatever, all you have to do is say, it's a disaster. The world's going to end tomorrow. The market's going to crash 4,000 points. Come on, come on. We want you on. If you're
Hmm.
bullish, like, it's not very interesting to
Yeah,
say, yeah, America's great and we're gonna do well here. It's just not it's not what the media likes. And the media people, if you really watch these talking heads on media, they're responsive to what happens today is what they're predicting for tomorrow. If the market's down today, they're bearish. If the market's up tomorrow, they're bullish. They have very short-term time frame. So as a longer-term investor, you need to have some time frame. Clearly, one of the lessons I learned from Vic Niederhofer, an incredibly invaluable lesson, is almost always the stocks are in an uptrend. There's a time to be bearish, but damn few.
hmm.
You had 62, 66, 70, 87 for what, a month? 2002, 2008, the COVID, which is over in another month, 2 months. What we went through last year, we're down for a while, but we're back in the middle range. These bear markets don't last very long, and you better be really careful. I've seen so many people have been bearish forever because another thing from my son's research is that people have a cognitive bearish bias. They
Hmm.
like to be negative. They love to hear somebody else is doing worse than them because it makes you feel good. So we like bad news. And we get sucked into bad news instead of saying, well, wait, there's some really good things going on in the economy right now. The Federal Reserve has several inflation, recession prediction indicators. They're really good. They're
Hmm.
really bullish. They're not saying we're going to have a recession. So all the yama yada purveyors of pessimism, they're like a broken clock. They're going to be right, every now and then. But right now, as I see it now, maybe I'm the guy that doesn't understand the world. That's why I can't bet everything on my view, right? But I'm bullish.
Absolutely fascinating conversation. For everyone listening right now, I'll put Mr. Williams' website in the description of the video and also links to the books we discussed and all the indicators that he's made over the past couple decades of his trading career. And obviously, it's led to massive successes for him. I am so excited to see how this plays out in the future. Would love to bring you back on at the end of the year to see if we get these predictions right here. But truly, from me and from the audience, we absolutely appreciate your time. It's a rarity to get these types of insights. So once again, just thank you for your time. I'm sure everyone learned quite a bit.
I hope so. It's always a joy to share what little knowledge I have and experience. So if it's helpful to anybody, then it just makes me a happy guy. I'm glad to do it. Thanks very much for having me.